talk about JavaScript. We're going to start with the basics, just variables, numbers, and strings. So first of all, how do you set this up? So here I have a little HTML file, and that is what you're looking at here when I load it up. You see it's under static/index.html. There's my file. It doesn't do anything. But I added here this script tag here. So let me just show you. You can just add that. You add a script tag, and then you set the source to be equal to where the JavaScript file that you have resides. In this case, I'm going to put it under there. Static. I'm going to name it script.js. Right. So that is what we did already, and so I need two of those. So now I need this file here, so I'm going to go over here under static directory. I'm going to say new other, and I want a JavaScript source file next, and I want to call it script.js finish. So I have my file there, and here is where I'm going to put my JavaScript code. Let's write a little message, hello world. And then if I go back and reload my page, I get a little pop-up that says, this page says hello world, because that is what the alert function does, pops that up. So that worked. So the basic idea is you have an HTML page, you can have a script tag in it. That script tag will load a JavaScript file which contains code that runs at that point. You could also put code right here. So instead of the source attribute, you can just put the code right here. Generally, you want to avoid that as much as possible because you want your JavaScript.js to be in a .js file. Keeps things simpler. Also, it helps you reuse the same JavaScript for all your pages. So now the thing is that when the browser loads this page, it's going to load the HTML file. Then at the moment it sees that script file, it's going to load it and then run it. And you don't know exactly because there could be more HTML down here, right? So you have to be careful about that. The fact that this could run before the whole HTML page has run. We'll talk more about that later and show you how to get around that issue. Okay, so let's talk about JavaScript. Here is the page. Let's go back over here. I'm actually going to go over into Chrome Tools, right? Remember, you just right-click and inspect element will bring up this tool here. In this case, I actually just want the console. So the console, you click on the console here. What you have here is a JavaScript REPL, read, eval, print, loop. So that means is that I can type in JavaScript code and it will evaluate it just like that. So for example, and it will evaluate it in the context. So I'm going to get rid of that. I'm going to say A is 242. I save that. I'm going to reload this. I'm going to say what is A? A is 242. Right? So this REPL evaluates within the context of this page. So after this page is loaded, executed. So it's very nice. As you can edit stuff out in here, and I can show you variables. So A is 242. I can make A11, and there is A11. I can make B is 44, and then I can say A plus B is what? 55. I can say C plus A plus B, right? So you can do math like that. So you have the usual set of characters, right? Addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division, right? And subtraction, and modulo arithmetic, of course. Still the usual stuff. Now the thing to note is that you see this happen right here. There is only one number type in JavaScript, and that is the floating point. So whereas in Java, for example, or C, you have integers, you have floating points, you have doubles, you have all these different types of numbers. There is only one in JavaScript, and that's the floating point. So even though that looks like an integer, right? It's not an integer. It's actually a floating point, which you find out when you try to divide. You get 1 divided by 2, you get 0.5. You get a floating point. whereas in Java you'll get 0 because it truncates that. So remember that only floating points, and of course that means that you have to be careful, because what is 0.1 plus 0.2 in floating point? It's of course almost 0.3, well, a little bit over 0.3. So yeah, you gotta be careful about that. So that's numbers. There's also strings, numbers and strings. I should have said over there. Numbers and strings. You see what I did there? Strings. That's what I want to talk about. So strings, I can once, like I said, Java is dynamically typed, so that means that I could set A to 11, then I could turn around and set A to hello, and that's just fine. And you can define strings with either single quotes or double quotes. It works just as well, like that, single quote or double quote. The single quote is especially nice because you can then do stuff like this, right? It's a google.com. So many times you will be writing you will have a string that is actually HTML, and as you know, HTML uses double quotes for its values, and so you can do that. So you can just use, if you're going to do that, you can use single quotes here and then double quote, boom. So that's the string, and the string once, the string class, if you will, has a bunch of methods. So this shows you some of the methods that you can apply on a string, right? So for example, you can do this substring. So once I have a string A, I can get a substring, started at index 5. So a.substring of 5 is going to count up to the 5th character, starting at 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then it's going to give me the result of that. A substring of between 5 and 12 is going to go between 5 and 12. So you have substring, you have a lot of very nice, useful string methods. The last index of, or index of, what is the index of the letter H? H is 3, right? Because 0, 1, 2, 3, there is the letter H. And you should go with documentation and familiarize with all of these. There's trim, which comes in, where is it? Trim. Trim is very useful, because people tend to write their name with spaces in front and after it, which is annoying, so you can just trim that guy up. And so trim gets rid of the white space before and after. So you use that a lot to clean up your the user's input. And let's see, what's another one? A split. It's also very useful. Well, I need a, let's say I have something like A, comma B, comma C, comma D, and A dot split on the comma. And that is an array. So A dot split will take a string and the thing, and will split that string based on whatever character you gave it, like that. And this is of course an array, which we'll talk a little bit more later. You can also do char add. If I wanted to do a character add position 6, it's going to be D in this case. Now notice that char add, it returns a string. So there's only strings in JavaScript. There is no character data type like there is in Java or C. Right? So even though it says char, it actually means a string of one character. So those are variables. That's how you use them. And next time we'll talk a little bit more about more advanced variable usage.